Well, hi everybody. Welcome to our class today on fixing sticky problems in Family Tree. This is the second and last class in the Boost Your Family History Brain Power set for the intermediate series. So if you missed class last week, we actually will be doing a little review today, and last week's class was recorded, so you can watch it on our website if you weren't able to attend. Looking ahead at what's coming up, next week is one of my favorite days of the year. We get to do the Christmas devotional. It's usually shorter, not going to be a full length class, but those are just always fun. And so we invite you to join us for that at the same time. It's this time slot, and invite anybody that you think might be interested in hearing a Christmas message related to family history. After that, we will be on break, Christmas break, until January 11th. And then on January 11th, we'll pick up with the Helper series. That series consists of three classes, and it's specifically designed for people who help other people with family history. So it is for consultants, but it goes beyond that. If you're maybe the family expert that people always go to, and you may not necessarily have an official calling in family history, but anybody who helps other people, with family history, those classes are designed for you. So we hope you can join us and feel free to invite your friends who may be interested. We, as always, invite you to watch for key takeaways from class. A key takeaway is just something that you notice, and it doesn't have to be something the teacher says, right? It just could be an inspiration or an insight, just anything you notice that you think will help you going forward or could help you help others. So at the end, we'll invite you to put those in the chat. So here's what we've got on our schedule for today. We'll do a quick review of last week's class. Then we'll talk about the fixing process, and it is a simple process. Notice I didn't say easy. It's simple. It's just got 3 steps. Then after we go over that, we're going to demonstrate it on the problem that we found in last week's class, and we'll wrap up with some success tips. But before we get into that, my dear cousin Gordon made a survey for this class, and I don't mean to make it sound like he just randomly made something up. He was gracious enough to create this survey from questions that I sent to him. And if you would like to take it, I believe that Gordon is going to put the link to that in the chat so that you can hop over and take that quick survey. It's got 2 questions that relate to today's class. And then I'm going to go ahead and go on with the next section of the class, just a short section, and then after that, we're going to look at people's responses. Gordon just put in the link to this survey, so we would love to get your input on that. Just, I think it helps since we're remote and not in the same room. It's easy to feel a little bit distant from each other, and I think this kind of survey helps us feel more connected. So I am very much looking forward to your responses on this survey. So now I'm going to go back into full screen mode, and we will start our first section of today's class. So let's do a quick review of last week's information. For purposes of this class, when we talk about sticky problems, we want to be clear what we're talking about. We're not talking about things like a date being off by a year or two, or a spelling error or variation, or a non-standard date or place. In the overall scheme of things, those are kind of like little drops of water on our family tree. Sure, we want to clean them up, but they're not the type of sticky problems that might make us lose sleep. The kind of problems we will be talking about in today's class are things like impossible or conflicting dates or places, such as all the kids in a family being born in the United States in the 1700s, and suddenly in the middle there's a kid born in Scandinavia. Probably not going to happen in the 1700s. Wrong relationships, where we see people connected to the wrong spouse or kids connected to the wrong parents. That's pretty significant when we're trying to build a correct tree of the human family. And we are talking about bad merges. that's the most common cause of sticky problems in family tree. Once a bad merge happens, it often snowballs across that one generation of the family and across multiple generations of the family. So those are the types of problems that we will be solving in or talking about solving in today's class. A very important concept that we introduced last week is the concept of intended identity. This concept only comes into play in a shared tree. It doesn't really matter so much in a personal tree that you're not sharing with anybody else, but in a shared tree, different people are creating different profiles, right? We're all contributing to the shared tree. So when someone creates a person's profile in Family Tree, whether I create it, you create it, whoever creates it, we intend that profile to represent a certain human being. That's the purpose of a profile. Is it's supposed to give information about one human being who lived in the world. So that's the intended identity. The earliest changelog entries show the original intended identity. And you might be saying original, well, why are you mentioning that? What significance does that have? Well, in a shared tree, that original intended identity can get changed through bad merges and wrong sources and wrong relationships so that the profile starts looking like it's for a different human being than the original one as it started out. So we said the earliest changelog entries show the original identity, and here is the screenshot of the earliest entries in the changelog of William Parkinson that we'll be looking at later. And we see that he's got certain parents, he's got a certain birth date, he's got a certain christening date and location, a certain name. All those things establish his original identity as the person who was christened on this date, born on this date, had these parents. That's how we tell him apart from every other William Parkinson. And believe me, there are many, and that's the case with a lot of names. They just get reused over and over again in each culture. I don't know of any culture that has really unique names. All the ones I'm familiar with, they always reuse names, which can cause some challenges in telling them apart. So the original intended identity helps us tell who's who. It becomes the baseline for untangling problems in family tree. If someone's identity has shifted, then part of the cleanup is to get them back to their original identity. Another tip that we gave last week is when you find a problem, it is very important to diagnose it correctly because if we diagnose the problem incorrectly, in other words, we think it's problem A, but it's actually problem B, then and we try to solve problem B, probably problem A is going to get worse. Here is an example. This is poor Samuel Hibbert. His record is has been messed up in Family Tree. I got partway through cleaning it up, and somebody with the best of intentions, I'm sure, came back and messed it up some more. So this poor guy, and I think one of the reasons he does keep getting messed up is that he was so badly mangled to start with. So you can see here that he has a death date in 1855. But he's got some errors over here. He's got some kids born after his death. Well, a well meaning user came along and said men can't father babies after they're dead. Only about 9 months is the only margin there that we've got. And so she said this death date must be wrong. And so she removed it. Pretty logical conclusion, right? Except when we got into the changelog, we discovered that poor Samuel had about 13 bad merges, and as I recall, there were even more nested below, so the merges had bad merges within them. The kids had been added through bad merges, and they weren't his kids. The death date was right. So the solution was not to remove the death date, but to repair the bad merges and put the kids back in the right family. So that's an example of trying to solve the wrong problem, thinking the problem was the death date when it really wasn't. The problem was that those kids born after his death weren't part of his family. So let's go ahead and look at the survey now and just see what your feelings are about dealing with the challenge of sticky problems. On our questions, the biggest response, what we asked people, what is your biggest concern with fixing sticky problems? 60% of you said the time involved in cleaning them up, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. 33%, five people said it keeps me from doing productive work in my tree. 5% of five people, 33% said, honestly, I'm not real sure how to clean them up, which is a very common concern. Six people said, I'm afraid I'm going to make things worse. That's also a very valid concern. And then a couple of people said, I keep seeing, oh, I guess there's, this one is blank, just other. So one person had an additional concern that wasn't mentioned. Another person had an additional concern that even after I try to clean it up and I put in proper reasons and sources, they still get messed up again. So that is also a valid concern. I hope this helps us feel that we're not alone, right? All of us are facing challenges with cleaning up these sticky problems. So the time spent, 37.5% of you said, I spend maybe 10 to 20% fixing these problems. About, looks like the majority of people said a fair amount, 20 to 50%. And then a few people said, I spend a lot of time, which is 50% or more. So I think the survey responses are very valuable. They tell us what your experience is like. So thank you for those of you who participated. We really appreciate that. And if you haven't participated yet but would like to, please feel free to answer. And if you didn't see the link, because if you join at a certain time, you can't see past entries in the chat. So if you didn't see the link, please post a note in the chat and my cousin Gordon can repost that link for you. But for now, we're going to pop back to the slide deck and let me get it back into full screen mode. Well, and also share mode. Here we go. Okay, so the fixing process, as I said, is really pretty simple. After we determine what the problem really is, after we've diagnosed it correctly, then this is the simple fixing process. Again, not necessarily easy, but there's only three steps that we have to deal with. The first one is to fix any incorrect merges. And I found that that is super important to do that first, because if you do the other steps first, then undoing the merges can mess up the work that you've done and even undo the corrections that you've already done. So the first thing is fix incorrect merges. The second then is to fix incorrect relationships for the same reason, because we want to save step three till the end, because if we do, so step three, sorry, getting ahead of myself. Step three is fixing any incorrect information like a wrong birthplace or a wrong residence and any incorrect sources. I've just found through many years of doing this that if I do this first, then if I go back and fix relationships and fix merges, I either waste my time here because I make fixes that turn out not to be accurate because of these fixes, or they're wrong, or I lose them. I've just found after making mistakes that this tends to be the cleanest, best process for doing any kind of fixing in Family Tree, of fixing of messes. So, with all that being said, let's go back to our dear Parkinson family and walk through cleaning them up. First, we're going to share a reminder of what the problem is with this family that we discussed last week. So, meet the Parkinson family. They have three boys named William. Well, sometimes that's okay, right? Because sometimes in some cultures, like in Latin America, I know it's true in the United Kingdom, that in, say, the 16, 17, 1800s, if a family had a child by a certain name and that child passed away, they often would name the next sibling the same name. That was the custom at the time. So this isn't necessarily incorrect or a bad red flag to have three Williams, but historical records show that the first one lived at least until 1836, which is 10 years after the second guy was born. And as we look at the last one, we see that he was alive because this guy died in 1871. Well, this guy was born in 1840, so he was born while the second one was still alive. So, in that case, it is extremely unlikely that a family would name three sons all the same name. The exception could be a blended family, but that turned out not to be the problem for this family. So we're not going to walk through all the research, but just again, by way of review, our goal last week was to determine if William number one up here really did belong in this family. Is he really the son of this couple, and are these all his siblings? Well, as we researched, we discovered that this family had at least two families mixed into them. Thomas and Elizabeth had these children with the gray arrows pointing. Those are their correct children. But this guy, he actually belongs in a whole different family. So this couple was married in Bolton, lived in Bolton as far as I could tell all their lives. Back then, people didn't tend to move around a lot, especially if they were miners or agricultural laborers. They stayed on their farm or they stayed working in the mine, in the local mine. So this family lived and raised their kids in Bolton. This family, notice it's a Thomas Parkinson and it's Betty, which is a nickname for Elizabeth, but they lived in a parish called Worley. And so they raised their family there. These were two completely separate families, and this guy belonged in this family. He wasn't part of this family. So, how are we going to clean him up? The first thing we're going to do is fix the incorrect merges. So, how do we do that? Well, we want to check William to see if there's any incorrect merges on him. And we want to check his parents since we have reason to believe there may be bad merges on the parents, since that's a common way of a kid getting joined to the wrong parents. So let's start with William. So I went into his change log and I clicked filter here because I didn't want to sort through his whole change log. I just wanted to see merges. So I clicked filter, I chose merges, and merges appears now at the top of the change log. And good news, it says there are no changes for the filter that you selected. I selected the merge filter. So it's saying there are no merges on this person. So that is good news. We don't need to untangle anything as far as merges on William, but let's go look at his parents. The easiest way to get to his original parents that we know are the right ones is to find them in his change log, and here they are. We've got Thomas Parkinson, abbreviated THOS, Mom Betty, and we've even got their PIDs. And they were indeed deleted by the bad merge. So the way we fix these folks is that we're going to start with Thomas, and we're not going to go through Betty because the steps are exactly the same. So we click on Thomas, and when we do that, we get his summary card. And notice that it says that his profile has been deleted. So then we can either click on his name or actually you can click person. Either way, they go to the same place. We click on those and we get to his deleted profile page. And it says person deleted. There is a link here that says restore person. That's what we need to do to bring Thomas back. So we click restore person and we write a good reason statement. Basically, I just explained this guy was born this year, this place. This other guy was born this year, this place. I found them separately in the census, therefore they cannot be the same person. So we write that little reason statement and then we click restore and Thomas comes back. And we follow the same steps for Betty. Now we're going to see why it's important to undo bad merges before fussing with relationships. After the merge repair, we've got relationship problems. William now has three sets of parents. He only used to have one set. Well, he has that same set, but we know they're wrong. He has the right parents because we just restored them. Notice those PIDs match. And he has a right dad and a wrong mom. So we need to clean up this parent relationship and this parent relationship because both of those have wrong components. How do we do that? Let's show ya. So one thing that puzzles people sometimes is they'll come to a couple and they will see that they have a certain number of children, but no children will be showing. The secret to that is that this is an expandable section. You can expand and collapse it. So if you see numbers for kids, but no kids are showing, just click this button right here and it will drop down the kids. So we have displayed the children here. And now we want to click the pencil next to the wrong relationship. The William does not belong in this family. So, and I took these screenshots back before the interface was redesigned. So the pencil looks a little bit different now, but it still is a pencil. So click the pencil and you get to a screen that looks something like this. Now I could delete dad. I could click remove or replace to delete dad, or I should say disconnect dad. Remove or replace to disconnect mom. But there's a little trick. If you click remove or replace next to the kid, it does both parents at once. So that just saves you a little bit of time disconnecting the parents separately. You can disconnect them all in one process. So we're going to click remove or replace and we get a screen that looks something like this. It says, watch out, you're going to be changing. And it gives you a red X to show, hey, you're going to be breaking this relationship. They even ask you to click this checkbox to say, yes, I've done my due diligence. I've reviewed all the relationship sources and notes for these people that I'm going to be affecting. And then you've got your choice of removing or replacing. Well, since our guy already has the right parents, we don't need to replace them. We just need to disconnect the wrong ones. So we're going to click remove parents. And once again, they're going to want a reason. And we say, well, the reason is that these wrong parents were connected through incorrect merges. So that's why we've got to remove them. Then we click remove. And it's looking better. The wrong parents are completely gone. We've still got this issue with the right dad and the wrong mom, but if you follow those same steps for this couple, that will solve that problem. So we did those steps, and now William only has one set of parents, and they're the right ones. So this is improvement. But remember that the parents were badly merged as well. So we need to go double check the parents and make sure they don't have wrong relationships. So Thomas has his correct wife right here, has his correct son. That's all good. But Thomas is still joined to the wrong wife, even though we removed William as their kid, that couple relationship still remained. So we're not going to walk through this because it's actually identical, almost identical actually, to removing a kid. So instead, you just click the pencil and you say remove the wife instead of remove the child. So I did that as I cleaned this up. Again, we're not going to walk through it. But we just click the pencil, disconnect Elizabeth from Thomas, and then when we come back, Thomas is only connected to his right wife. Fortunately, when I checked her, she had no wrong relationships, so there's no repair to do there. So we have now finished steps 1 and steps 2, and we are ready to go to step 3, which is to fix any incorrect information and sources. Fixing the incorrect information is generally pretty easy because we've already done the research. We know what the correct information is. So in this case on William, we need to standardize his birth date and remember from last week, those of you who are here last week, remember that a user actually just typed in Bolton based on the bad merge. The birthplace didn't even come over as part of the bad merge. The user added it afterwards, assuming that the merge was correct and that this really was the Bolton family, or that William really did belong in the Bolton family. So she gave him a birthplace of Bolton, but of course, we know he wasn't born there. He was part of the Worley family, which is part of Haslington. So we need to fix this. We're going to click. Now this is a pencil, but back when I took this screenshot, the button said edit. So we're going to pretend this is a pencil. We're going to click it. We get in here and see that the birth date hasn't been standardized. The Bolton incorrect thing is showing up. When I say hasn't been standardized, I need to clarify. Family Search put a standard here, but they kept the old incorrect one and or non-standard one, and there's no reason for that. We can get rid of that. So what we do is we edit this to be the exact standardized date, and notice that the non-standard one disappears when we do that. The birthplace was a little bit trickier. So the christening record provided the birth date, but it didn't explicitly give the birthplace. And the only place I found William was in the 1841 census, which only gave the county. It did not give the birth parish. But the christening took place in Haslingden, and all the other kids were born in Haslingden. Based on that, I felt that it was a very safe inference to conclude that he was also born in Haslingden. An inference is very different than a random guess. Let me give you an example of what I mean by a random guess that I don't recommend. And this is one I actually found a few months ago. Somebody had found a child that was christened on a certain date or married on a certain date. I don't remember for sure. But on the christening record, there was a name of a father. So the person added the father, and then the father had no vital information on the christening record because it was for the child. So it had all the christening information for the child, but only the name for the father. Well, the user concluded, well, I bet the father was born the same place as the kid, and I'm going to guess that they were born about 20 years earlier. And that would be logical if the kid was their first kid. But as I researched, I discovered that this guy, it might have even been his second marriage. So this kid that was christened was like his ninth child or something. So the conclusion that he was born 20 years earlier was off by about 20 or 30 years. And so to put in an assumption that is just based on pure speculation is not helpful in a shared tree. It can lead other people astray, and it can be a bear to research and clean up. So that's an example of what not to do. But if you've got solid evidence, like all the other kids were born there, they were all christened in the same place, and this person, William, was christened there too, we've got a lot of solid evidence there, so I did feel comfortable inferring the birthplace of Haslingden, but notice that I specified that it's an inference. I didn't say I've got solid evidence in such and such a source. So if someone comes along and let's just suppose that it turns out he's born in a neighboring parish, then the person knows, well, this was an inference and I do need to correct that. I think that's very unlikely, but anyway, I wanted to explain the reasoning there and when you can make solid inferences, and then with the counterexample I shared, when you probably don't want to just speculate on what might have happened without any good evidence. So now look at William's stuff. His information looks so much better. It's all cleaned up. Now we're ready to tackle the sources. So in a bad merge, sources are transferred over, and that's why it's important to go through and clean up any sources that don't actually apply to this person. So we look at the first one and we see that it actually matches all his christening information. It matches his original intended identity. So this source is good. We don't have to do anything else with that. We just leave it. But the next source, what do you guys see here? Bolton. We know this guy wasn't from Bolton. So this source applies to the other family. So we've got the Thomas and the Betty and those other people that we know are the right kids, but it doesn't apply to our William, who was, his family lived in the Worley parish. So this one needs to be detached. Fortunately, detaching sources is super easy. You click on the source and it opens up. and you get a list of options here, and one of them is detach. So you click detach. They're going to ask you why you want to detach. And so I just explained, hey, I've already found the right 1841 census. And since I've done the research, I could say confidently that this census is for a different William Parkinson and his family who lived in Bolton in Lancashire. Notice up here the reason statement for attaching this source originally. Yup. So I just have to laugh at that. I'm sure the person wrote it because they didn't know what to put. It can be challenging, right? Thinking of a good reason statement. That's why we have a class on writing reason statements. But I'm sure this person just thought, I don't have a clue what to put. I'm just going to put yep. And so they did, but it turned out that that wasn't a source for this person. And so, one of the values of writing good reason statements is it really does make you think through your logic. And you might, if you start to write the reason statement, you might say, wow, I really don't have enough evidence that source applies to this guy. Maybe I'd better not attach it before I do more research. And then you do the more research and find out, this source really doesn't apply to this guy, so I don't need to attach it. So we write a good reason statement, we click detach, and it detaches that source so that it no longer shows up in the list. Guess what? This source is also not the right one. So I detached that one as well, but then we were left without an 1841 source, and I knew he had one because I'd found it in my research. So we're going to try and find that source. We come over here to the search records box on the profile. We click the Family Search logo. Family Search is always my first choice for historical records if they're available there because Family Search controls the links. And so those links are pretty much guaranteed to persist, whereas these other ones, yes, I do attach sources from the other ones, but they're not guaranteed to persist. And if a version of the source, such as a census, because like all these places have censuses, so if a version of the source is available on Family Search, I'll give that priority instead of attaching one from a different site that may change. So we click Family Search. It does a search based on the information on that person page, and here is our source in Worley. We know it's the right one. We look at the family members. It's got all the right family members, the kids that were all christened together that we saw in the last class. But does anyone notice what's wrong here? It's already attached to someone different, not to the William we've been working on. This guy ends in HHY, there's his PID, but this correct 1841 source is actually attached to a different William ending in Q28. So we've got a problem there, but this brings up a good point. What do you do when you're in the middle of a cleanup and you find a rabbit hole with further messes that need to be cleaned up? You could dive down the rabbit hole. I've done it. But I find that when I do that, I often lose my place in the current cleanup effort. I found it's a lot better to write down this thing, to write down, 1841, the correct 1841 source for William HHY is actually joined to William Q28. I need to check this out and probably do some fixing. And then I write that down and I get back to my cleanup effort. That way, I'm sure that I finish the cleanup effort. I don't lose my context. Honestly, when I let myself get down rabbit holes, a lot of times I never go back to the thing that I was working on. I forget about it or get down another rabbit hole. So I've learned that I have to be really careful about that and not I have to be disciplined and not go down rabbit holes. Just write down things. I keep a spreadsheet of things that I found that I have to clean up. And that way I know I didn't lose them. I'm not going to lose them. I can go back later on, but I'm not going to compromise my current cleanup effort. So we make a note of this and then we go back and finish our cleanup. We cleaned up William. Now we're going to go clean up Dad. We expand his name because THOS is a widely accepted abbreviation for Thomas, so I'm very comfortable that that's his real name. And then, based on the census information that we found, we know his approximate birth year and his birthplace. So we can put that in. And a reason for doing that is it helps prevent bad merges in the future. It's not a guarantee, but it is definitely a good prevention. Now we're going to pop over to mom. And mom does not have a maiden surname because she was created based on William's christening. And maiden names were not put on christenings most of the time in England at this time. So her maiden name is blank, but we did have her birth information from the census. So we put that in. Again, hopefully that's going to help stop future bad merges. But you know what? I hate to leave poor Betty hanging there without a surname because that is also a great way to prevent bad merges. When there's not a maiden surname, when there's a married surname, that contributes to bad merges. So this is just a little exercise to show you how easy it can be to find this missing information. It didn't take me hours and hours of research. I think it maybe took me 20 to 30 minutes. And so, that's really not bad when you consider that that could prevent bad merges that could take hours to untangle. So here's a quick look at how we found the maiden name of Betty in this situation. So we're going to use that time-honored principle, using what we know to discover what we don't know. In other words, we're starting with solid information and using that as a bridge to new information. So here is our timeline grid that we looked at in the last class. Just for those of you who may have just joined this week, let me give a brief explanation. This is just a snapshot of the family. In the first column, we have their names and approximate birth dates. Second column, we have their information as shown in the 1841 census. Next column, we have their information as shown in the 1851. So the first thing I want to do, I am very certain that Betty's maiden name is going to be on her marriage to Thomas. So let's look for that. Well, that might sound like a big ask, a broad ask, but we can narrow that down. So we've got birth years, approximate birth years for both Thomas and Betty. Well, most likely they didn't get married before age 18. That would be very unusual. So we can start our search in about 1814 when they would have been about 18 years old, and they most likely married before the oldest kid. Not always, but most likely. So let's use 1822 as an ending range. So we're going to search from 1814 to 1822 for a marriage of Thomas to Betty, Thomas to any Betty, and at this time in England, women usually got married in their home parish. We know she was born in Haslingden from the census, so we can guess a good estimation, a good inference is that she got married in Haslingden. Now, if we don't find information, of course, we'd broaden our search. But look what we find. We search by Thomas Parkinson getting married in Haslingden between 1814 and 1822 to a woman named Betty, last name unknown, and we come up with two reasonable options. They're both within our range, and neither of them lists any identifying information that would help us tell them apart. So right now, we don't know which person Thomas married. Well, fortunately, in this case, we've got another marriage record we can look at. Sadly, Thomas died between 41 and 51, and Betty remarried during that time to a Henry Barlow. If we can find her marriage to Henry, we may be able to find her own maiden name. So, doing a quick search brought up just one matching marriage record. The groom's name and occupation match what shows in the 51 census. We've got Henry Barlow, he's a farmer. It's a reasonable marriage year. It takes place between 41 and 51, which is what we expected. And Betty is a widow. So, what do you notice about her dad's name? It's Henry Barnes. So now we're confident that this woman's maiden surname is Barnes. So we come back, we enter this maiden surname, and that has fixed that problem to prevent a future bad merges there. But I didn't pick a textbook case with no problems here. So this is actually what really happened when I was trying to clean up this family. So then when I entered her maiden surname, I got some more possible duplicates and notice that one of them is the woman that he didn't marry, that other marriage that we looked at to a Betty Ashworth. And so I went over there to see what was going on, went to Betty Ashworth and discovered that those children that we know belong to Thomas and Betty Barnes are actually connected to Thomas and Betty Ashworth. So at this point, are we feeling a little bit like Hydra? Do you remember the story of the monster in the Greek myth that every time you would cut off a head, two more would sprout in its place? Sometimes it can feel like that. And that's why we're going to be giving some success tips in just a minute as we wrap up. But I did want to make another comment. One of the things that helps the most in fighting Hydra is a remarkably and deceptively simple solution, and it is just to write things down. I can't tell you how many times it has helped me to solve a problem by simply writing it out or taking good notes, or to prevent a problem by taking good notes. Here is a continuum of ways to write things down from very simple to more robust. You can throw stuff in a paper notebook or binder. You can use an electronic document like a Google Doc. You can use a traditional research log, either paper or electronic. You can keep things in a spreadsheet. You can keep things in an electronic binder like Evernote or OneNote, things like that, where they really do function electronically like a physical binder does. So though I have a professional researcher friend who keeps all her stuff in Evernote and she loves it. You can use Trello. That's kind of an electronic post-it note program where you can arrange post-it notes in columns. You can use a timeline grid, such as we saw when we were troubleshooting this family. You can use a robust program like Goldie May, and I'm a huge fan of Goldie May, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that in case you haven't used it before. I'm not plugging this as an advertisement, or I don't get any kickbacks from it. I know the developer. He's a great guy who developed this, Richard Miller, to serve the family history community. And he offers a free version. Yes, there's a paid version, but you don't have to get it. Just if you want the features, you can consider that, but the free version serves a lot of people very well. The thing that's so good about this is it's specifically designed to be used with family history. It integrates with FamilySearch. It has special features such as the ability to link to family tree PIDs. If you just enter the PID, it creates a clickable link that allows you to go straight from Goldie May to family tree. It's pretty cool. They also have a subway map that plots out locations and lets you see, oh, all the kids were born in Cranwell, Lincolnshire, except this one that was born in Scandinavia. That's probably not a kid that belongs in this family. So the subway map makes it easy to tell when there's anomalies. So if you're interested, you can just visit goldiemay.com. One thing is, for some reason, people always want to spell this Goldie May M-A-E, but it's not. It's M-A-Y. It's actually named after, I think, Richard's grandmother or great grandmother. Somebody had the name Goldie May. So it is spelled M-A-Y. So for sure, if you want to visit, just be sure to spell it the right way. So that's Goldie May if you're interested in checking that out. As far as preventing sticky messes from being repeated, as Gordon pointed out, there's not a guarantee, right? You can clean things up and they might still get messed up in the future, but it does prevent a lot of messes to add vital dates and places for all the family as well as sources for all events. Because then, for one thing, people get in there and they are likely to see the correct information. I know not everyone looks at sources, but a lot of people do. And so they see the correct information. And another thing I think, honestly, is just psychological. They look at it and they see, oh, there's 10 sources. It looks like this person has been well researched, so I probably need to think twice before making changes. You can also add an alert note to say, hey, please don't remerge this person with PID 1234567 or whatever if they keep getting merged with the wrong person. You can also add a brief life history so that you describe the events of that person's life. Now, this is not a warning. We're not supposed to use life histories for warnings, but you can say so and so was born here. He lived in the small town of Worley, which was a mining community. Anything else you want to mention? He had 8 siblings. Just write a kind of brief life history. By default, sadly, the life history is at the bottom of the profile, but in settings, you can actually shift it up to the top, which I have done. And so that it's very easy to do. Just if you decide that you're going to do this, I would recommend putting it at the top so that people see it and they're more likely to read it. And then that can also help them, if they read it and go, oh, he was born in Worley and lived there all his life, this probably isn't the same guy as the Bolton William Parkinson. So let's wrap up with success tips for family history. This is what I was referring to when I was talking about Hydra. We do need to prioritize. We can't fix and clean up everything. There just aren't enough hours in the day. And that's okay. That's why we're working in a shared tree. We don't have to do it all. We just have to do our part. And if we keep our part of the vineyard clean or we clean up the messes we feel good about, then we've done our part. And that's what matters. And so we shouldn't feel guilty. We shouldn't beat ourselves up. We especially shouldn't cut corners because we're trying to cram in too much work. Because when we cut corners and rush, we're very likely to make mistakes that make the problem worse. So be okay with prioritizing and just realizing you do what you do and you let the rest go and be peaceful about it. Another tip is to be methodical. Follow the process, such as we demonstrated today, and write things down. Part of being methodical can be to do comparisons. And this is also part of writing things down, of course. So a comparison table can help you sort out bad merges. This link right here will give you a link to the when we give you the link to the handout, it will have a link to this slide deck. When you open the slide deck, you can come to slide 66 and click on this link for an example of a comparison table. It's actually this one. And then if you click here, you get a page where you can download templates. I think there's one for Google Docs, Excel. I don't remember if we have it for any of the Mac things like Pages. If we don't, and if you need that, shoot me an email and we can provide that template for you. But templates can really help you as you're trying to sort out these messes, as you complete a table. It just helps organize the information for comparison purposes, and you can see anomalies and things like that. So success tip number 3 is to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Ways that you can do that is not to assume. Don't just make broad assumptions without some kind of proof. Use what you know to discover what you don't know. Don't merge unless you're sure the two profiles represent the same person. Do your best to add accurate and complete information to Family Tree. And this is one that I added for this class today that I've become, or I should say I was reminded of recently, where someone said, well, why shouldn't I just create a new clean profile and let the old one just be a mess? Well, there are a few reasons for that. One is that it does leave a mess. Another is that if temple work has been done, it's been attached to the old profile. And if you create a new one, it's going to look like the temple work hasn't been done. Now, yes, you can call support and have them transfer the temple work over, but then that's another thing in their to-do list, and they're constantly overworked. And then you do end up leaving that messy profile, and so it didn't really solve the problem. It's kind of like sweeping a mess under the rug instead of actually cleaning it up. So it's, in my opinion, it's better to either take the time to clean it up properly, or if you don't have the time or that's not your priority, don't take a shortcut like creating a new profile that doesn't have the ordinances. Instead, just say, that's not my priority. I'm going to have to leave this for somebody else. And you could leave an alert note on it and say, I've noticed these things are wrong. I personally don't have time to clean this up, but maybe my notes will be helpful to you. So I generally, except in very extreme circumstances, do not recommend creating a new profile for a person and just leaving the old messy one there. The last bonus tip is, if you look at this, especially if you haven't had to do much cleanup yet, you might listen to this class today and go, oh, good grief, this is just a lot of work and it's complicated. And that is true. Some messes are very complicated to clean up. But one thing I found over the years, having done this for, I would say, the last maybe 13 or 14 years in Family Tree, is that it's definitely gotten easier. So the more you do it, the more you learn the tips and the tricks, like the order of steps so that you don't have to repeat work. And there's a certain sense of joy, honestly, in cleaning up these messes and knowing that these families are organized and that the problems are cleaned up. And honestly, since this class was advertised or noted as a class for Latter-day Saints, I can tell you that I've also felt gratitude from people on the other side that they don't want their stuff messed up in Family Tree, because as we've been reading in Come Follow Me in the Doctrine and Covenants, what we record on earth is recorded in heaven. And when we create messes, now, of course, I don't know all the logistics of that, but I have to think that in heaven, they don't want our corresponding earthly records to be wrong. They would like them to be accurate, especially if that's that person's record. I think that's why I felt that sense of gratitude from the other side, that those specific people were grateful that their profiles were now correct and they weren't joined to the wrong spouse and didn't have the wrong kids and so forth. Just think how you'd feel. You'd want your information to be correct in Family Tree. It does get easier and it is fulfilling to be able to make our tree closer to that record worthy of all acceptation. So that brings us to the end of our class today. We did a review of last week's class. We gave the three-step fixing process. We walked through cleaning up William Parkinson's tangle, and we gave success tips for fixing sticky problems. So here we would like to give you an opportunity to put your key takeaways in the chat. And then as far as the class materials page, let me just bring that up and show you. This contains all the class materials for the intermediate series. So the core classes as well as the boost classes. The class we did today is this last one. So intermediate boost class 2. There's the link to the slide presentation. Oh, I forgot. There's a link to the merge analysis template. And then there's also the participant survey. This is not the one that we did earlier. This survey is actually asking for your overall feedback about the whole class. So we'd love to get your feedback, things that you liked so we can keep doing them, things you didn't like so we can stop doing them. And I think that's it.
Rose asked the question, is brief life history set per individual PID, but then seen by the whole family search community in the new location?
Oh, good question. My understanding is that the position, oh, that's a really good point. I understand that that setting is personal. So, yeah, I had never thought of that before. I am so glad you said that. So, you can move it to the top and it'll be at the top for you, but it won't necessarily be at the top for other people.
Great,
Sorry
thank you.
about that. So that was not necessarily good advice to move it up so that other people would see it. That was incorrect. Thank you.
And then Betsy Price said, what to do when a spouse with only a name, no other information is added to the profile. You went through that quite a bit. Do you have anything else you want to maybe add for that?
Yeah, actually, that has become a common problem recently because there's two reasons for that. One is that it used to be advice that was given. Like back in the 1970s and 1980s, they would say on your own personal tree, just put the name in, even if you don't have any other information. That is still good advice on a personal tree. It's not such good advice in a shared tree because it confuses other users, it leads to bad merges. And the other, so that's thing one is I don't recommend that in a personal tree, but actually that isn't all of thing one. So it used to be advised, and then when we went to a shared tree, people stopped advising it for a while. But recently, Family Search has started doing hints, and they call them. I've heard them called a couple of things: golden hints, tree extending hints. They are hints. In fact, I could even bring up a picture of one. Let me, so that you know what I'm talking about and what to do about these if they happen. I'm going to bring up, where's my Snagit? Oh, it's right in front of my face. So let's open up Snagit and I'll show you a screenshot that I just barely took of one of these hints. Okay, it's taking a little minute to come up. In the meanwhile, I'm looking at the chat. Anne says her takeaway is the order of three steps. And Hydra, she says, I know exactly what that feels like, Anne. You could relate, it sounds like. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I thought that was very applicable. So here is an example of a new type of hint that Family Search has started giving. So I am in the fan chart and I have been working on Edward Graves. And here is a hint, a dotted line for his dad. And if I click this, it's going to show me. In fact, I think I have a picture of that. If I click it, let me expand this. When you click on, oh, this is actually a different guy, but when you click on this hint right here, it opens up a panel, and if you scroll down, it lets you add this person with no additional research, no additional information. All this has is this guy's name and his sex, and that is it. I have given some feedback to Family Search, and I know a lot of other people have done that feedback, saying that this is not a good process. I know it was done to try and add more people to Family Tree, but in my experience, about 98% of the time, people that could have been added this way are duplicates. Family Search does not find these duplicates because of the sparse information. If all this profile has, like the questioner was saying, the reason I don't recommend adding the hints like this with sparse information is Family Search can't do good duplicate matching with just a name and a sex. How many Edward Greaves do you think have ever been born in the whole world since time began and are in Family Tree? There's probably hundreds of them. And so there's no way Family Search can match duplicates on that. So like 98% of the time when I've dealt with these, when other people have added them, I've gone in and done searching and have found that they were duplicates. So this really isn't building the tree. This is just adding a duplicate that somebody else is going to have to clean up later on. So, does that mean you should never add this person? No, of course not. This is showing a place where someone might be missing. But in my experience, they're usually already in Family Tree. Now, granted, I do most of my research in England, Canada, and the United States. So I can't speak for other countries like Asian countries. I can't tell you what the percentage of duplication would be there, but I can tell you in heavily researched areas such as the United States, the UK, and Canada, very often these guys are going to be duplicates. Well, how do you find the duplicates? I'll give you a brief rundown because The reason it's going to be brief is that this Wednesday, I'm teaching a class on this subject at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, just because I've noticed this has become such a huge problem in the tree that people are adding profiles with just a name and no vital information, and they're very hard to make sense of unless you're an experienced researcher. So, again, 5 o'clock Mountain Time this coming Wednesday, I'm teaching a class on how to research these very scanty profiles with very little information, or if you're the person adding them, how to find the information so that you can add a quality profile instead of adding one that just has a name and no other information. So, just to be brief about that, again, we use what we know to discover what we don't know, right? So, here I've got a woman named Annis, and I've got her husband Albert and all those kids. If we've got some good information here, I can start tracing backwards from Annis using what I know to discover what I don't know. I can make sure that her dad really is Edward, because sometimes in England, Edward and Edwin get mixed up. I can find her as a child with her parents so that I can find out when her dad was born, where her dad was born, who her dad married, and who her siblings are. And then when I know that information, I can come back, and I'm not going to use this hint because clicking yes here does not do a duplicate search. But instead, I would go to Annis's profile in Family Tree and I would click Add Father from there. And then I would create Edward's profile with the good information that I had, or rather, I would enter the good information. Edward Graves, born such and such a year in such and such a place. This is his spouse. I'd enter a death date if I had it. Then I would do the duplicate search that Family Search does when you try to add somebody, and chances are it's going to find him already in the system. So then instead of creating a duplicate, I would just attach the record that was already there. Saves time, saves hassle, saves confusion, and it helps build the tree. So that is a very quick preview of what we'll be covering in a lot more detail in the class on Wednesday. And you all are welcome to come to that, and feel free to invite other people if they would be interested. Elder Brown, are there any other questions that we need to deal with? Oh, Nancy.
Says, how do you move alert notes in settings?
Oh, good question. So let's go to Family Tree. Let's try with William Parkinson. So see, I've moved my brief life history. The way you move that is go down here to Tools and My Layout Settings. And then you've got your section order over here, and you can drag these into any order. So like if I wanted to put brief life history back at the bottom, I could do that. Or, oh, but wait, I was expecting, Nancy, that there would be an ability to move alert notes, and there isn't. I apologize. I was expecting it to be there and it's not. So apparently, all you can do, you guys, is order these sections on the left. You can't order the sections on the right. So basically, it's just a default. And if I'm wrong about that, if anybody knows of a way to order these sections on the right, please let me know. But as far as I know, this is the only way to reorder sections, and apparently it only applies to the left side of the page.
Uh,
So oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Alder Brown.
Lois answered this as well. I believe that alert notes are always going to pop up at the top.
Yeah, Lois, that's my understanding too. So whenever you add a note, if you don't make it an alert note, it only shows up here and on the Collaborate tab. But if you click Alert Note, then, as Lois says, I'm going to cancel that because I don't need a note. It's going to show up here in a banner at the top of the page. And as far as I know, there's no way to change that. Now, if someone has added an alert note and you absolutely know that it's wrong, you can delete another person's alert note, but I wouldn't recommend that because unless you really have done the due diligence and the research and you know that that alert note no longer applies, that's the only time I delete it. Otherwise, alert notes are valuable and the person probably put it there for a reason. Okay, George says, key takeaway, learn how to recognize errors and correct them. Practice makes perfect. Kept working on the tree. Love that. Jan says, now I really see why I should not get sidetracked. Oh my goodness, me too, Jan. Easier said than done, right? But she says, I really see why I should not get sidetracked. No rabbit holes. Nancy is signing up for Goldie Mae. Janice found the 3 steps and the comparison chart helpful. Rose brings up a good point. Rose, thank you. She noted that for Edward Graves, it said he was mentioned in the record of Albert Morris. What if he was mentioned as the witness or the minister, Rose says? We need to be very careful on that. So just always check and always check the image if possible, because I've noticed that the indexes are right a lot of the time, but they're wrong enough of the time that it's worth checking the index if you can.